everyone. My name is Mark Vina, and welcome to the SmartTechCheck podcast, where we cover all tech topics that are smart home automation, security, and console gaming related. Today is Thursday, April 1st, 2021, the start of the baseball season. I'm certainly excited. Just checked with a few people, and the Yankees are tied 2-2 in the is it the 8th or 9th inning, guys?
Ninth
inning. Thank you. See, I have my own sports information team on the side here, plugging scores in. I should actually switch the feed to baseball scores at the bottom, like ESPN. But without any further ado, let me bring up my three amigos here. That is John Quain, Stewart Wolpin, Rob Pegoraro, who have been frequent visitors to the podcast. We like to talk about all kinds of crazy tech topics, even some tech topics that are not so crazy. John, Rob, and Stewart, how are you?
I'm good.
Apparently, I'm sunburned.
Stewart, you have an impressive library. I have to just say that. I mean,
that's a small fraction. My
really?
wife loves it.
Well, I'm very, very impressed.
Are there any baseball bobbleheads on those shelves?
No, there is one baseball bobblehead. Most of them are in my office in my office. They're not on site. This is the movie and music collection.
Very impressive, Rob. Very impressive, Stewart.
Thank you.
And I'm looking at Rob's background. Is this kind of your Doctor Strangelove? I'm taking over the world backdrop.
This is the war room. You can't fight in here.
Right. One of the great lines in movie history.
Mix it up a little bit.
One of the great lines in movie history. And John, you're calling in from your multi-million-dollar studio, as I can see.
Right.
Is your off? Is the image? It's still kind of backward. Is it inverted? Is that
here we're not in the movie. We're in the mirror, so when I move left, it goes right. But those are real objects behind me. This is not a green screen. This is
when you pedal the bike. Does it go in reverse?
I'm testing like 5 different bikes right now. I've got an EV, the Mustang to pick up tomorrow. I've got TVs behind me. It's a lot of technology. So.
Well, hey, a lot of crazy things happened last week. Want to do what I normally do, and I want to just go through a whole litany of topics. We'll probably have a few laughs on some of them. I know we will have a few laughs on some of them. Let me do this, and let me bring up our little screen here to make it very easy for all of you folks to kind of follow through here. You want to do that? You brought this topic up, John. Actually, by the way, I have not asked my brother who works for Amazon,
right,
how he's going to vote on this whole Amazon union issue. Was that the vote happening today?
It already happened, but there's a very lengthy process of counting the votes, which they do by hand, which they do going over each name. But with the added wrinkle that they're going to do it over video conferencing like this. So it's going to take several days. It's not over yet.
And, it's amazing. Tell me that there's not going to be like lost chads and it's going to take 3 weeks for them to get to a vote. I would have to think it's automated as Amazon is. They should get to a count on that. It's really about the eligibility of the voters, so the employees. That's what the key issue is. And either side can whine and say, we don't think this person should be eligible to vote. And they can contest each voter, and they recount after they count 100 votes. They go back and then they look at them again. I don't really understand why. And then there's a labor relations board that all this, sort of appeals to. So, I'm guessing maybe early next week we'll know. For people who don't know, it's happening at one facility in Alabama. That's where they're voting to unionize. Amazon has thwarted it in the past, but it looks like there's a good potential that this may actually happen, and the floodgates will open is the idea, and that they'll start unionizing all over the place. Have there been any polls? Have they conducted any type of polls to get to a sense of how they feel down there, how the vote may go?
I mean, just anecdotally, it sounds like the people there want to unionize. That's what it seems like the dominant, prevailing wisdom is. It's a little difficult to tell. I mean, there have been some interesting numbers. I was just talking to some antitrust attorneys. I can't say who, but earlier today. And the numbers that are bandied about are that Amazon will control in one way, shape, or form, or another 50% of the retail business in the United States by the end of this year. I mean, that's like, we were trying to figure out how that actually worked, but it seems like maybe not such a crazy number. So yeah, there's got to be some concern about the size of the company and how their employees are treated, et cetera. So it's a big issue.
John, is that 50% of all retail or 50% of online retail?
All retail.
Wow.
That's big.
There isn't a heck of a.
I thought I had read it was 50% of online retail.
It may be, but even at that,
yeah.
I mean, I was just here at a Target in New York City. Not a lot of people going to the Target in New York City. So I'm just,
come to my neighborhood.
Yeah. I mean, effectively, well, this was in Harlem. I mean, so yeah, effectively, that's a huge chunk. And the Chinese company thing is this very interesting thing that's become more apparent during the pandemic. And that is that, we're going to put tariffs on Chinese companies and we're going to prevent them from doing it. And there's going to be a trade war. And why did that never happen? Well, kind of Amazon. So what those companies did in China was they increased their prices. So they just put it on us. But they also do these things where they trademark, 100 different product names. And then they release the product on Amazon under all these different product names. And then they, and they really pay attention to the ratings that consumers give them. So if they see a product's going bad, they pretty much dump it right away and shift production to something else at the factory in China. And it's a fascinating business that's happened, but it's covered everything from, trainers and treadmills to running shoes. I mean, it's really been an astounding business, and it's just dominating. You don't even realize it. I know I've bought, purchased bike accessories and things like that I'm sure are from, some China company in the middle of nowhere. But very interesting business model.
Well, how do you think Amazon's approaching that from a business strategy standpoint? It's obviously something that they're doing in a very transparent manner. But do you think Amazon? What do you think the end all plan is with this? I mean, do you think this is just given the atmosphere around Chinese companies and it's part of the business model? Do you see any deviation along those lines?
I don't. I mean, all this is like automated. Like much of Google's business is automated. There's no human being to talk to. So there's no strategy behind it. It's just if you plug in the right things and you pay your bills and there aren't many complaints, it's going to work no matter where you are. And so I think it really doesn't, there isn't a strategy behind it right now. And, Amazon is a company right at the moment when they're questioned, they're the ones that tend not to show up for those Senate hearings. I don't know if you've noticed that recently. Facebook is going, Dorsey's going, from Twitter, but nobody from Amazon. So it's like their whole war they had, and I don't want to jump to the next topic, but which is the Twitter war.
Mm-hmm. Rob, any thoughts on your behalf?
So yeah, the whole Amazon is weird because when it works, Amazon's it's amazing. But then on the other hand, there's such a problem with counterfeit goods. Like I don't want to buy a KN95 mask off Amazon because I've just read too many things about glitches with that. Like, do I want to get an extension cord when I could just buy it from Home Depot, or do I want to get whatever. And basically, I'm trying to spread my business around a little bit because I feel that as someone within walking distance to a Whole Foods, I'm already got enough of my customers spend at this one giant company.
Right.
Well, you brought up an interesting observation about counterfeit goods, and even more so than counterfeit goods is defective goods. I mean, there's been, and I know Apple has been up in arms over this, but you look at things like lightning cables and USB chargers. There's a lot of stuff that comes out of these companies that look identical to the real McCoy, from a Apple accessory standpoint, yet they're not designed to the specifications that they need to be.
They fray even faster than Apple's lightning cables do?
They believe it or not, they do. But
how is that possible?
But you can't die from a frayed lightning cable. You can die from a fire that starts in your house because the AC adapter is substandard. So it's a big issue. It's a big issue. Stewart, any thoughts?
I mean, this is all a part and parcel of capitalism. You know, a company starts off and they get big, and at what point do they get too big that they have to be reined in, either by the people who work for them or by the federal government or by themselves? And as we know in capitalism, that companies very rarely rein themselves in. So our history is replete with the government stepping in when something gets too big. I know that I just heard this morning that Amazon is going to start opening like discount stores, brick and mortar discount stores, to try to offload a lot of slow or low selling goods that don't seem to be moving online or just cost too much to ship versus how much profit they're going to make, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Whether or not these are going to be the Amazon Go kind of stores, or whether or not they're just going to be traditional, 99-cent stores, I don't think anybody knows at this point. I mean, there are always pros and cons with businesses that sometimes get too big in this. Hopefully, in this post-COVID era, any retailer is going to be welcomed by landlords, given what's been going on in the commercial retail space. But are they going to be welcomed by other retailers? So, I mean, there's always these back and forths, and the basic underlying question is always, when is big too big? And I think that's what we're facing right now with Amazon.
Right.
Well, there was also that 1, 2, 3, 4. I challenge you to a Twitter war, which was really not, was kind of in the Elon Musk smoking a joint on the air kind of vein. What Amazon is thinking about, why Amazon did that, I have no idea. But for people who don't know, they started to battle with Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and said, we're more progressive than Bernie Sanders, crazy, insane stuff like that. So they should probably take some lessons from Twitter, probably a little bit more better on PR and stuff. It was not a good week for Amazon. So we'll see what next week brings.
Yeah, I'm going to be curious to see how this union vote turns out, because obviously that has big implications, even though, like you said, John, it's happening in just one state. God knows Amazon has such a humongous presence just in about every state in the country. I think they're in every state in terms of a distribution. There's a distribution center, at least one distribution center in every state in the country. They obviously have an enormous footprint. So I am sure they are looking at it with earnest to see exactly what happens here. Here's a topic, Rob, that I know is close to your heart. This is your topic. It's also a topic that's close to my heart. Streaming TV availability of MLB games, especially for those lonely local fans who, obviously want to watch the game. They want to watch their local team, and they may not be able to watch it because it's blacked out. I assume that's what you're talking about.
Not quite. It's, can you get the regional sports network, the RSN, that carries your team's games? Mm-hmm. Because certainly MLB has always had, not always, but for years has had MLB.TV for out-of-town fans. So you, Mark, you can watch the Yanks from the Bay Area, no problem.
Which I do.
But if you want to watch the Yanks from the tri-state area, MLB has said, well, go pay for cable or satellite. Last year, for the first time, at least one streaming service carried the RSN of all the MLB franchises. Between now and then, we've had a huge step back because YouTube TV and Hulu have both fled the RSN market, running away from it as if it were a drop third strike because they cost too much money. And so now you have 22 teams, by my count, that are only available on one streaming service, AT&T TV, at $85 a month. I should note that your Yanks are one of them. My Nationals are another one of them. Mm-hmm. Stewart's Mets are still available on 4. So it looks like in that respect, it's better to be a Met fan than Yankees fan. And it's crazy because this can't go on. People are not going to jump back into the arms of big cable or satellite TV to get their local team. They may use a proxy server or VPN to watch local games via MLB.TV. They may just find something else to watch. But none of the teams seem to want to go direct to the customer the way the Toronto Blue Jays have for a while. And the other problem, as a couple of analysts noted to me, was the first team that does that is going to tell all the streaming distributors, yeah, you can definitely drop this because they've gone DTC, direct to customer. But that's where we're going to wind up. So at some point, one of these RSNs has to sort of say, well, this will be our rebuilding year in terms of how our games get to fans, because the system we have now is not working.
But you know what's funny about this is that, Stewart, you can speak to this, is that during the 50s and 60s when you had just, of course, local air-based television. The Yankees, for example, what killed the Yankees during the 60s, even when they had good teams in the early 60s, every game was broadcast on WPIX. And that was one of the reasons they cited as
Channel 11.
Channel 11, that people they wouldn't want to go to the game. Why do I want to drive into the Bronx and watch the game when I can watch it for free? And so that's been that was a problem for years. And when I get back to the East Coast, I always notice that the WPIX, which is still around, I think they broadcast 10 games a year now. I think it's not a big number because most of the games are the Yes Network, and or if you're outside the regional area like I am, because I'm based in California, it's not a problem because I pay, and I don't pay $89 a month. I think the MLB package is $70 for the season.
It's free if you're a T-Mobile subscriber. Sign up now.
There you go. Thank you for that advertisement. That's good.
Like in all things in sports, things have gotten way more complicated in terms of business models. Who's making the money from the streaming? Who's making money from the RSNs? Cannibalization. But this goes back to the early days of radio, this fear of broadcasting versus live attendance.
Right.
From the early days of radios, even in the 1920s, you had this push and pull all the way through TV, through cable television, to the establishment of the what really, I don't know, disturbs me isn't the right word, but what surprises me here is that baseball is continually trying to attract a younger audience. Baseball's prime audience right now is folks like us, El Tecacas. And in not allowing younger fans to stream, which is their chosen method of media consumption, I think is cutting off their nose to spite their faces. Figure out the damned business model between MLB TV and the regional sports network. I'm sure that some deal can be struck between, say, SNY and MLB TV that would allow 20-somethings to stream Yankee games. It doesn't make any sense to me why they would be almost purposely cutting out the one demographic that baseball has been trying to appeal to for the last decade.
Mm-hmm. John?
No, I'm not a huge baseball fan. I have other sports that I like, but I empathize with the cost. I'm trying to watch a Formula One race on the weekend, and I don't have a service in the country, but I have it in the city, but it doesn't get it in the country. I mean, it's gotten crazy, and it's another fee on top of what you're already paying for these streaming services. To Stewart's point, if I've got Hulu and Disney Plus and Netflix and Amazon Prime Video, I mean, it's already out of hand. So adding another one on, somebody asked me the other day, well, why don't you just pay the $100 subscription? I'm like, I'm not, because I've got all these other subscriptions already. So yeah, they need to figure that out. It should be a lot easier. And Stewart's absolutely right. Our generation is not that generation, but everybody watches stuff on streaming. It's got to be easy. If they don't make it easy, they're going to lose that audience. Yeah.
The one thing that they've done to attract live fans with this, I'm a season ticket holder at Citi Field. I get MLB TV for nothing. Mm-hmm. It's part of my subscription, my season ticket package. Now, I'm still blacked out from local streams, but at least I don't have to pay extra for it. And the reason is I bought season tickets. So it's a come on to get you to buy season tickets.
Well, and presumably, Stewart, that MLB package, you use it to watch a winning team, not the Mets, right? that would be my guess.
Here we go.
See, this is where Stewart leaves the podcast.
Slowly.
He just disconnects. I do want to ask you one question that's not on the list here that just happened yesterday, and it's different. It's obviously not a baseball question, but it's a football question. The NFL added a 17th game yesterday, which, what frustrates me about that, so I can go get on my soapbox, is I really think the NFL has had the perfect regular season and playoff season without going over the top and adding every team. It's a wild card team, and the entire league makes the playoffs like the NBA. And it's really purely about money. It's really they're adding another wild card team, but you guys have a bad taste in your mouth about that, or do you just think, well, this is naked capitalism, and you've got a bunch of owners who want to make more money?
I've had a bad taste in my mouth since they split the majors into 3 divisions in each league.
Yeah.
I'm still dealing with this DH in the National League thing.
Go back to 1973. And by the way, and I believe Ron Bloomberg was the first DH.
That is correct.
I pull that one right out of left field, so to speak.
No, out of DH.
Exactly. Okay, let us talk about NFTs. Stuart, this is your topic. We have to, unfortunately, because it's a topic that's in the news. It's dominating a lot of the tech press.
I think I understand the topic. I don't understand the value attached to it. I saw yesterday that there was an NFT that was done by by John Cleese, the ex Monty Python guy, who apparently made a stick sketch of the Brooklyn Bridge, which they are now auctioning off with a minimum bid of like $40,000. And I haven't looked at it lately, but I'm reading the story about it, and they do not show a picture of what the NFT is. So I go to the auction site. It is literally a stick figure that looks as if it was drawn by an 8-year-old, and that somebody would pay a mass. I'm completely flummoxed by this entire phenomena, and I'm sure
but that is the history of.
But I don't know what I'm missing.
Go ahead, Rob. Please.
Using art to make a statement. Marcel Duchamp taking a urinal, and that's one of his ready-mades, and the fact that it's not a new thing. I don't know if I got it then or if I get it now, but people will pay for scarcity even if it's fake scarcity.
But I understand paying for scarcity, but it's not a matter of being scarce. It's a matter of just being useless. I understand the scarcity, supply, and demand side of capitalism, but wouldn't the scarcity and the value of the scarcity be based upon the necessity of the item to begin with?
I think I figured out how we solve this baseball game streaming problem. The team RSN sells an NFT of each game to the super fans, and that pays for it for everybody else. Everyone wins.
But I actually think, the NFTs are just the same as the Mona Lisa. I think that it's just the work of art in the age of mechanical reproduction. I mean, it's just in a digital form. I mean, and you could put it on, your micro LED wall and display it that way. So it's a work of art just as it would be any other way. Sure, there are odd things. The New York Times, where I write for the New York Times, did a column, and then that column was an NFT that they sold, for charity. But that's more of a gag, right? That's not really to the point of what this is. So just the same way that somebody is going to spend, $20 million for Mark Rothko, it follows that given that the next thing would be this format, whether people will like it 10 years from now, I don't know. It doesn't have the same aesthetic appeal to me, but I'm somebody who goes to the art museum once a week. So, I'm not like a regular person, maybe, in terms of looking at that. But it's kind of a gag.
I just don't see the art in any of it. That's the problem. I mean, the Mona Lisa took him months, weeks, months, whatever. Even the most strident artist spends a great deal of time and effort on these. Pete Alonso, the first baseman, put up an NFT that was essentially a fancy baseball card, which probably took a graphic designer 10 minutes to throw together. I understand it's art. I just don't understand I think there is a stark difference between a Mark Rothko and a stick figure drawing by John Cleese, who he tossed off in 5 minutes. And I haven't seen an NFT that is art.
Well, the ones that drew the attention that were sold actually were like the 5,000 pictures taken over the course of so many years.
Yes, I saw that. That was really impressive.
Right. So the John Cleese stuff was just fun. you know.
No. I wish to me it's just old format or old media in new format. I don't think it's taken on something that is of its own yet, the way that old medias are adapted and changed by the format in which they appear in. For instance, the World Wide Web was originally somebody took, like a newspaper would just put their text online and that was it. And now it has evolved into a web-based newspaper, which is different than the print. And all old media goes through that evolutionary process of you first slap on what was old and just keep it. Like, for instance, television was simply filmed radio when it first started, until the media evolves its own forms. And I guess maybe we're at this point where NFTs right now is still slapping old media on a new format and is yet to take on something that is unique to that format to differentiate it from where that media was before.
Right. What do you think about film?
Said about that? Yeah.
Right, like film. But, I picture in the future that NFTs, they could be anything. So maybe a virtual reality, artwork that somebody's created that you can kind of live in and experience in a different way, something like that in the future. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, film is an art form now, but it's not like painting or sculpture, it's its own.
I'd like to see, actually ask Rob a question. Have you bought any NFTs lately? Rob?
I don't think I can afford them. No, honestly,
you can come clean.
I'm good just buying old-fashioned, digital goods, software, apps, songs that are not non-fungible tokens. I don't need that sense of exclusivity.
Still buying CDs, right?
I am. Actually, it's been a while.
Or in the case of Joe Biden, it would be phonographs. Hold on one second.
My brother is a big vinyl collector. Don't knock it.
Yeah, I have a bunch of vinyl here.
Well, here's a topic I want to talk about because I think this is interesting. If you look at the rumor mill of the week, there seems to be broad consensus that Apple is going to come out with a ruggedized Apple Watch, which is, to me, really intriguing, because the category they haven't gotten into yet is ruggedized laptops, which is a market. I mean, Panasonic has been in that market for quite a few years. In fact, that's probably the only reason why you would buy a Panasonic laptop. They have ruggedized models.
And ruggedized smartphones.
And smartphones as well. It's kind of a category that they have a very strong presence in. But what are your thoughts on that? Do you really think there is a significant market for ruggedized watches? I mean, that kind of says that they're going to be there are applications and usage models that are watch specific for different occupations, which there are. It's not presumably there are markets for that. But what are your thoughts on that? Let me start with John.
Definitely, for me, absolutely. Look, I'm wearing like the Garmin top of the line watch. I'm a guy. I'm gonna run outside. I was bicycling earlier today. I mean, just the Apple Watch is like, man, I can't wear that. I can't have people seeing me wearing that thing. It's just not. So I definitely think there's a market there. Absolutely. I think there's a huge market, for that. I don't. So I think it's just recognition. Now, if they get into that market, what does that say about these poor other smartwatch people who, that's been their niche the whole time? What happens to them?
Not much, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Rob.
Yeah, same. I mean, it's a category of the market that's been there for a while. Apple's been pitching the Apple Watch as something you use to work out. It tracks your steps, your altitude, all these other things. Why not? I mean, it definitely makes more sense than the $10,000 Apple Watch edition.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. You can only imagine when Apple's going to charge for a ruggedized watch because that is a very niche specific category type of watch. So that's not going to be a discount to a current Apple Watch. There'll be some type of premium associated with it. Stuart, are you going to go run out and buy one?
I will not be going out. I am unlike John. I'm an indoor cat.
And
the only edifice I scale are the stairs outside of my apartment building.
Okay.
But Apple has usually left the niche in a part of their business to their app makers and to their accessory makers. OtterBox does a huge business in ruggedized cases.
Yes, cases. Correct.
And I believe they and a lot of other people already make ruggedized cases for the watch. So to me, it would be very surprising if Apple decided to do its own ruggedized version of the watch, unless they did something over and above simply putting, a militarized casing around its innards. Like you mentioned, there may be some really niche, but Apple has really never done niche. They have always left that. Then the Apple ecosystem is built on, here's a vanilla product, you app developers and you accessory makers turn it into something that somebody in a particular vertical would be able to use.
Right.
So I'm not sure I understand why they would do this, or even if they will do this.
Well, again, it's only a rumor at this point, what's interesting, it was not just a rumor from a couple of folks. I mean, it was a fairly pervasive story. Right. That's a bunch of stories that spread on wildfire. And to your point, Stuart, what is the definition of ruggedized? I mean, if it's simply it's got a lot thicker outer casing, but the innards, the operating system, the applications are essentially the same. I don't see there are a number of manufacturers that make accessories that you could essentially achieve the same thing. So I have to believe it's more substantial than that, but we'll see, last question I want to get to, and this is, I think this is so entertaining, and I cannot wait to hear the feedback from you guys on this, is that, Intel launched this new campaign, this new PC versus Mac processor campaign. I hear chuckling all the way in the background, and it's funny. Intel has had a tough row over the last couple of years. They've recently gotten a new CEO, Pat Gelsinger, who is, by the way, I think a top flight guy. I really think if anybody can turn that place around, Pat can. But it's interesting that Intel is not it's not like the company's falling apart. I mean, you talk to certain people and you get the impression, ever since Apple announced Apple Silicon, this is going to be the death knell of Intel. I don't see that, because the x86 Intel PC space is still mammoth and compared to the Mac OS and just the conventional Mac level laptops. But I almost think that Intel invites, this kind of criticism when they run campaigns like this, because Intel, outside of the famous Intel Chime and the Blue Man Group stuff they did years ago, I mean, Intel is really not known for its its advertising, and something that really makes the company more human and more heartwarming. So I want to start with Rob, because Rob, you have to have an opinion on this, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure where Intel's going with that, because you really can't make that choice unless you're buying a Mac, in which case you should get Apple Silicon. It's new. The battery life is so much better. The Intel processors that Apple still uses are really, really old. There are really good competitive advantages. Right now I'm using a PC where the laptop is folded up in tent mode, so I can look at the screen right in front of me, which you can't do on a Mac. That's great. And also Intel put that money into improving the battery life and the performance of your processors, because they've lost a step. That's what they got to fix. They don't need an ad campaign for that.
Right. John?
Yeah, I same way. I mean, every few years people look at Intel and go, it's square, it's really boring. And, the stock price tanks and they say they're in trouble. But the size of the market share is huge, as you point out. And losing Apple is not a big deal. I mean, it's a big deal in terms of cachet, but in terms of reality, in the bottom line, not a lot to them. It is a weird ad campaign because, again, it's not like they're Microsoft. It's not the Wintel argument against. So it's just it's an odd thing to do. Where Intel really lost out was in the mobile space. That's what they're really suffering from, that mistake of not getting into the mobile space and not getting into cars. That's the big deal right now.
No, they missed the music category. They missed the phone category. They missed the tablet category. Yeah. They're trying not to lose the car category. Right. Well, but see, what I think the challenge with Intel is, as someone who, worked along Intel when I was at Compaq and Dell and Alienware and just, know a lot of the folks over there, they have such an impressive love of technology. When you look at some of their their marketing campaigns over the last 30 years. I mean, they really built capabilities at the processor level. They really thought customers would really appreciate it. And to their credit, there was a lot of there was a tremendous value proposition in different capabilities that they brought over the years. But the reality is that if you look at what Apple's doing, and they may think this is an unfair observation, but when Intel talks about Apple Silicon, they rarely get into the weeds. I mean, they do get into the weeds to a degree, of course, but their discussions about what are the real life end user benefits that I can take advantage of if I'm using Apple Silicon. For example, battery life. I mean, their belief is that by implementing their own processors, Apple devices will be optimized for the operating system software that's loaded on those devices, and the user is going to get a much better experience. That's a fairly straightforward, simple message to understand. When you talk about multi-threading and 16 cores, and you can do all these elaborate things, for a lot of users, that the eyes start to roll back. So I think that's the thing that I think is the big distinction between Apple and Intel. Stewart,
to paraphrase Cleavon Little from Blazing Saddles, can't you see this is the last act of a desperate chip maker? Intel replies, I don't care if this is the first act of Henry IV. We're moving ahead with this. I don't understand what Intel thinks it's going to get out of this. Apple buyers love the M1 chip, not only for the battery life, but the promise of, especially for its developers, of an even ecosystem of apps working across devices far more smoothly. So if you download a given app for one device, you will be able to download parallel apps, and with Apple Keychain and all the connections between the devices, you create a far more seamless ecosystem, which has always been Apple's
their forte. Yep.
That's exactly right. So all the M1 does is extend that. So I'm not sure that Justin Long is going to convince any Mac owner to suddenly.
He's not. No.
Well, but you see, back to my original comment. Why did they have to use Justin Long, who was in, who switched teams, so to speak, from
they're following the
Sprint. The Verizon guy.
The Sprint Verizon formula, as if again he's going to convince anybody.
Where's Sprint now?
Yeah. No, I just think in advertising and marketing, sometimes there's something to be said about being too cute. When you're too cute with a customer, it's a bit of an arrogance type of thing. And I don't think Intel's trying to be arrogant. I just think that the campaign, there's other vehicles they could have used to articulate the differences, because there are significant differences between Intel platforms and Mac platforms. I think John or Rob, you brought it up, in that there has been lots of innovation that Microsoft and Intel have brought along over the last couple of years, like the 2-in-1 notebooks, touch screens. Apple's still way behind the 8 ball. Of course, their position is they still don't believe touch is part of the clamshell notebook experience. Of course, that will all completely change when they come out with an operating system that does have support for that capability. But that's a different discussion. Let's get to, in the last few minutes we have here, let's get to my favorite topic, and that is predictions. So, John, I'll let you lead off with that. Since it's opening day, I'll let you lead off.
Oh gosh, boy, that's tough. I guess my prediction is that they will, in fact, vote to unionize in Alabama, those Amazon employees, and it will touch off kind of a chain reaction. But I think next week we're going to learn, yes, they vote yes.
Mr. Rob.
We already sort of got to this. So yeah, basically what we said before about Amazon's Twitter strategy of tweeting like Elon Musk, it's not going to work. It's not a good idea for Elon Musk to tweet like Elon Musk. They need to get some grown-ups in charge of their social media.
Stewart.
Something that John touched on before, the explosion of streaming, of subscription streaming. So try saying that for
streaming. I think it's streaming services.
Streaming services. It used to be, even just last year, that consumers would subscribe to 2, maybe 3, but now with the plethora of streaming services now available. What exactly is the tipping point? As Dylan said, something is happening, but I don't know what it is. There is something in the TV business model with the rising of ATSC 3.0, to the explosion of these streaming services, to consumer concerns over cost and access. In other words, what content is available on what service. It's hard enough to figure out what shows are on what channels, much less what streaming things are on what streaming services. So something I think is going to happen, is going to come to a head here. I think you're going to start to see some acquisitions to shrink the number. And I think you're going to see some business model shifts, whether it's something, a lot more people adopting a Roku kind of situation where they can conglomerate all of these services into one operating system, or TV makers start to demand more cohesiveness or impose a cohesiveness on these streets. I don't know. Something's going to happen. It's only going to get worse before it gets better. And the consumer will be the one to be suffering until somebody figures out something has to be done.
And my prediction is that Justin Long will be getting, I hope he has another day job, because I think the Intel campaign will last another 2 or 3 months, and they will be turning to another classic campaign, because I just don't think it's going to last very long, just given some of the durations that it's gotten. But guys, listen, thank you very much for joining me for today's podcast. Please follow the Moor Insights and Strategy podcast audience on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And until next time, have a great week.